Hello, dear friends. This is Kardec Radio at 11 p.m., nourishing our souls together as we study another chapter from the book, Jesus in the Home. This book was psychographed by Chico Xavier, and the spirit author is Neio Lucio. You're welcome to join us as we study chapter 4. Today it's about the lesson of the seed. There is much to know. As Emmanuel says in the preface of this book, that Jesus continues to speak to disciples of all attitudes. And for all of us, actually 2 centuries past the times of Jesus coming in the flesh, we still need to revisit the lessons, but mostly the nonverbal lessons. There's much for us to train ourselves to really boost our divine to another level. Okay? So welcome, friends, and as you are joining us, let us recall that in these lessons, Jesus, the disciples, and other people are gathered together in Peter's home. And in that encounter, Jesus is reading the sacred scriptures and talking about it, and he allows people to share their thoughts and their feelings. And throughout that moment, he shares with us the wisdom that is guiding us to a new life. So welcome, Lea Severo. How are you? Rihanna, welcome, Rihanna. Hello, Raquel Bakeshi. Karina Alice, how are you? Teresa Castro, welcome, Teresa. Sol Souza. Carol Correia, welcome. Adilson. Renata and, yes, Maxi. Jailton. Welcome, friends. Nora Brazil is here as well. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Are you ready? Yes? So let's go. Chapter 4. The lesson of the seed. Because his listeners were perplexed, Jesus spoke convincingly. That's how the text begins. Something was happening, right? And people were perplexed. And Jesus spoke with conviction, with firmness, assertive. He was assertive in addressing the point. And these are his words. So let us listen, because there are quotations, meaning these are the very words. Amazing as it is, these spirits are not making up. They're actually reporting to us, describing to us, or I would say transcribing what has actually happened. You know that everything we say, we do, we feel, and we think is registered, okay? Is registered in our spiritual body. So, and it's registered in the ether of life. So it's recorded in the big camera of the universe. And the superior spirits say it's possible to have access to those recordings and rewind the tape. And Neio Lucio is one of these spirits that come to us to report of those times. Are you ready? Jesus says, it is really very difficult to overcome the troubling cares of human life. Everywhere we look, we see war, misunderstanding, injustice, and suffering. In the temple, the Lord's house, we see the rich displaying pride and vanity, and the poor, hatred and rebelliousness. It is not always possible to have as pure and clean of a heart as might be desired, because we're surrounded by thorns, mire, and serpents. However, the idea of the divine kingdom is just like a tiny grain of wheat It is nearly imperceptible when it is sown in the ground, and it has to bear the detritus and the weight of the soil. Nonetheless, if it does sprout, neither the pressure nor impurities of the soil can stop its progress. It passes up through the dark ground, and although it takes most of its nutrients from it, its drive to seek the light above holds sway. From then on, come rain and shine, day or night, it labors tirelessly to grow, and in its eagerness, the seed multiplies for the good of all. Disciples who have felt this inner drive, as happens to the grain of wheat, know the long roots hold them to earthly inhibitions. They know that malice and suspicion shadow their footsteps, that pain is a constant threat, even though they feel more than anything else the drive to grow spiritually, and they can no longer be held back. On behalf of the general good, they continue to act within the sphere in which they are making their pilgrimage. They no longer encounter irresistible temptations amongst the flowers along the way. The re-encounter with the divinity, whose heir they recognize themselves to be, is their unwavering goal, and they can no longer rest, as if a consuming and flaming light were tormenting their soul. Without even realizing it, they produce the fruits of hope, goodness, love, and salvation, because they never look back to count the blessings of which they were the faithful instruments, seeing the Father is the overriding concern vibrating in the souls of these longing children. The Master didn't say anything for a few moments, and then concluded. As a result, even though disciples' feet remain stuck in the mire of the earth, their untiring work for the good, wherever they may be, is the unmistakable mark of their spiritual growth. We can recognize trees by their fruit, and we can identify heaven's workers by the services they render. At this point, Peter interrupted and asked, "Lord, what then would you say about those who understand the sacred principles of charity but do not put them into practice?" Jesus looked pleased and explained, "These, Simon, are seeds that lie dormant, in spite of having been sown in the bountiful bosom of the earth. They contain the precious qualities of heaven, but they remain useless for a long time. Nevertheless, we may be absolutely certain that downpours and tempests will pass over them and will change their position in the soil, and that they will sprout victorious someday. In our Father's fields, there are millions of such souls awaiting the renewing storms of life, so that they may head toward the glory of the future. Let us help them with love, and in our turn, let us press on with our eyes fixed ahead." Then, while everyone was silent, Jesus blessed the little family group and left. Okay, the lesson is short but deep. It's about the seed. We're talking about the troubling problems of daily life and how to reconcile with the invitation of the good news. We were given many lives to play in whatever way we pleased, until the very moment we were granted the opportunity to know better. Now, in Spiritism, we have a new understanding. And with that understanding comes a proposal for change. But many of us are resisting the change. And Jesus says the storms of life will push us to that needed change. So it's up to us if we want to change voluntarily for the pleasure and the honor of serving God, or if we want to do it out of pain. That's the rule of life. It doesn't happen in a different way. To know what to do with our freedom is wisdom. We have that inner divine drive to sprout, to bloom, to fruitify. But it's up to us when we're going to do this. We dictate the pace, and that's part of God's laws, the law of freedom. We can choose the pace of our growth. Growth is inevitable, but the pace is up to us. But since it's inevitable, God in His justice and loving care pushes us to the needed growth. It's like students in a school. I can go to school and I can dictate my pace, but there is a time frame in which I have to work upon to achieve a certain goal. I cannot spend 10, 20 years trying to do my PhD thesis. I can take it as long as I want, but there is a time frame to fulfill it. There's a limit. In life, it's no different, right? For anything we choose, there is a restriction, there is a deadline, there is a limitation, there is something. There are consequences even for the choice of not progressing faster. I know many people who in the spiritual pathway, they tell me, yeah, I'm a spiritist and I understand that, but come on, I can have a glass of wine. That's not going to be a problem. They still don't understand what they are studying. Because yes, you can have a glass of wine. But the matter of fact here is not if you can, but if you should. There is a big difference between what I can do and what I should do. When I know of the laws of God, we learn what we should do. And yet, we know we can choose to comply today or tomorrow. The lesson of the seed tells us that no matter what, we're going to strive to grow. And the surroundings will be either boosting us to that next level or trying to deter us. That's why Jesus says, and very convincingly, his discourse today is different from yesterday. He really comes to us today with a different tone. He comes to us in a very assertive way, telling us that we should not doubt that our growth, in our growth, we will experience factors that will deter us, that will try to create obstacles. As he says here, and I will repeat this part, he says, the disciples who have felt this inner drive know that long roots hold them to earthly inhibitions. They know that malice and suspicion shadow their footsteps. Of course, people are going to look at you and they're going to say, are you for real? What's the catch? What do you really want? What's your hidden agenda? That's their problem, not mine. Why? As Joana de Angelis says to Divaldo Franco, People often project their shadows onto others. So I doubt the good of others because I don't believe in the good in me. Inevitably, majority of people, if not all, almost all majority, really majority on earth, have a problem in their self-esteem. They're still not feeling that they are this deserving, love-deserving children of God. So when we lack self-esteem, we project that vision of ourselves onto others. Right? It's like glasses. Let me put it on here. Right? I will see what my lenses allow me to see. Right? That's what it is. I will see what these lenses allow me to see. And I will project myself through it. So around our steps of doing the good, we'll find pain, he says. And even though we will keep growing for the general good, like a seed of wheat that makes bread, nourish people's souls. We need to keep nourishing. I remember when Kardec Radio started its journey in 2011, July 4th, 2011, at 12 p.m. There were many people doubting the validity of a web radio. And we understand anything new seems awkward, right? Strange. But thank God, we've never taken seriously the voices of discouragement. We've never taken into account the voices of malice and suspicion. And 8 years later, we're still here, thank God. Expanded with more than 4,000 podcasts available to the public, hosts from around the world, bringing studies in great depth to the whole world. And we have many different platforms, and the work is all volunteer-based, 100%, though the Spiritist Society of Virginia sustains the efforts of Kardec Radio. So we're sharing this with you because if we do not make this effort to sprout, to branch out, to bloom, to give fruits, we'll be missing our role, which is the general good, to benefit everyone, right? Jailton is asking, being suspicious of someone is always a projection of our low self-esteem. What about when we see clearly something bad in someone? Doesn't it give us the right to be suspicious? Okay. Jailton, of course there are cases and cases. Of course there are people whom you can see clearly that they have that shortcoming. But we don't need to go suspicious. We just say, I see this is off, and I'll be prudent, but I won't focus on it, okay? Because there are people who really linger on suspicion, and they start spreading out and really creating a life around that suspicion. So it's pretty bad. So we would say not every suspicion is driven from it, but when we are suspicious about the good, okay? When we see, like Jesus said, you want to know a tree? Look at the fruits of the tree. So when you see somebody who has been giving fruits for a number of years, non-stop, you're like, this is real. And nobody else is saying anything, right? But there are people, like at Jesus' time, who would look at Jesus and say he's a womanizer because he would talk to women at a time when you're not supposed to talk to women unless they were from your circle of social family relationships. People would say he's a drunkard. He was a drunkard because he would be around people who were drinking, or he would, like at the wedding of Cana, he would be helping transforming water into wine. So people would say he was a revolutionary because he was constantly talking about a new way of being in life. But he was none of those. Some people thought he was mentally ill. None of those either. That's when we consider a projection, somebody who only does the good and 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 the good. And the people who are feeling like themselves as the righteous people, usually the Pharisees, the Puritans, they start projecting those shadows onto that person. That's what Jesus is telling us. Inevitably, they know that malice and suspicion shadow their footsteps, that pain is a constant threat. Even so, they feel more than anything else the drive to grow spiritually. They can no longer be held back. Now, the assessment question for us. Do you already feel yourself with that inner drive that Jesus is saying? That inner drive to grow spiritually no matter what? That you're never going to stop? Or do you feel like iffy? That's what we're talking about here. And he pauses for a few moments, again using that silence to make people permeable to the conclusion. And he says, as a result, even though disciples' feet remain stuck on earth, their ceaseless work, untiring work for the good, is the unmistakable mark of their spiritual growth. If I stop because somebody, I know people who say, I stopped working in a spirit center because that person told me that I couldn't do this. And forgive me for portraying the drama, because this is the childish side of the person. When we're adults, we just understand that life is going to say no to us. And I'm not going to throw a tantrum at life and say, now I'm no longer going to go back there. This is a child's tantrum in an adult's body. No, you go back and you understand, and you be the one who understands. I remember the current president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, Jorge Godinho Neri. When he came to the United States, he used to come to a center in Rockville area. Though he was highly recommended by the then president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, the president Nestor Mazzari, people didn't give him much opportunity. He spent a year sitting and attending the meetings, and they would give him no role whatsoever. But he respected and waited, respected and waited. One day, they gave him an opportunity. 6 months later, he was promoted in his professional life, had to go back to Brazil. And I witnessed the many people who were in that center regretting that they hadn't given him an opportunity sooner, because then they found out how great of a worker he was. Why am I sharing this to you? First, because it's a public story. It's not a secret. Second, because in this story, we're gonna find a lesson for us. That sometimes life is going to say no, not now. And are we going to throw a tantrum in life saying, I'm no longer going to be a spiritist. Come on. We need to grow up. And forgive me for saying this, it's not particular to any of you, but it's just like in general for all of us, that we have to take that inner child and say, hey, hold your horses there. You don't need to go rebellious or sensitive. Just be an adult and understand. As chapter 10 of the book Thought and Life says by Emmanuel, when we understand, we just let it be. It's okay. If that door closes, I don't need to throw a tantrum or give up on my spiritual growth. Well, if that center closed the door for you, open another center. No big deal. We need to multiply anyhow. That's not a big deal. We don't need to be enemies. No. We're just saying this because people still have a very needy child inside of them. And when we talk about spiritual growth, like the seed, we need to keep working, untiring in the works of the good. Okay? And grow, he says. We can recognize trees by their fruit, and we can identify heaven's workers by the services they render. There are many people who hold positions, but I never see them. People barely talk to them. And what are these positions for? When you're talking about spirituality, we're talking about service. We're not talking about power. Right? So then Peter asked, what about people that know about things and don't practice? And Jesus looked pleased with Peter's question. And that's so interesting that Neio Lucio shared that nonverbal lesson to us. Because Jesus will be pleased with us. Not that we need to please him, but he'll be happy to see that we, like Peter, are fully aware that there are many times in which we know the lessons and we don't practice. So he explained, don't worry, those seeds are lying dormant. One day they're going to sprout. But inevitably, they will need an extra boost. And what is that? The tempests of life, the storms of life. As he calls, the renewing storms of life. So, we better do it sooner than later. We could rest more, but we don't want to rest that much to the point that we are awakened in the middle of a real storm. We want to be less asleep, more awake. We want to be less idle and more active in the good, so we can fulfill our role on earth. Let us help them with love, and in our turn, let's press on with our eyes fixed ahead. You know, I love Jesus' lucidity and clarity. Imagine this lesson 2,000 years ago. If today it's a hard lesson to swallow for many people, imagine 2,000 years ago. Many people don't want this kind of lessons. They want phenomena. That's okay. But if you have already awakened and you have that inner drive for spiritual growth and you already found a pathway to helping others, the solution for us here tonight is really do what Jesus is saying. Keep our eyes fixed ahead and don't blink. Just keep focused on the goal. Even if people turn to you or to me and say, you're obsessed about doing the good. That's not a bad obsession, right? And we keep working on it. As he says, we press on. And at the end of it all, when Everyone was silent. He was blessing everyone and left. It's important for us to observe this, that our dear Neio Lucio is portraying Jesus completely. The words, the lessons, the verbal lessons, and the nonverbal lessons. He's teaching us, we talk and then we leave, because we can't hold a good conversation for long, not yet on earth. So we really need to be wise enough to balance moments of conversation and moments of silence, and inner work, inner reflection. Right, Dulce? Right, John da Rosa, Daisy, Hercules, Andrea Torres, Angelita, Patrícia Williams, Alicia Ramos, Estela Godinho, Sunshine. Hello, Sunshine, and Paula. So, friends, for us, what is the homework for the next 24 hours? First, ask, do you already feel that inner drive that Jesus is talking about for spiritual growth, no matter what? And growth based on service towards others? And the second question is there anything deterring you? Are you going to wait for the storms of life to renew your drive? Hopefully not, right? Sunshine is saying it's important for us to remember to serve from the heart and with joy. Agree with you. From the heart. That's the only thing, Sunshine, that sustains us no matter what. It's that, why do you do it? Well, the right is the right. What's the wrong when you're doing the right? Right, Alexandra? So right now, we're going to wrap up with a song. No, with a prayer. Yeah, prayer can be a song, right? But it's going to be a prayer without music, but the music of our hearts. Okay? So let us feel the joy of this moment. It's always a joy. Dear Mother, Father God, thank you so much for these teachings, and especially for the opportunity of being here together. We thank you for the loving Chico Xavier receiving these pages that transport us to the presence of the Master, and feeling his presence, we pray that the blessings of these moments be multiplied in benefits to everyone who is at this moment suffering from different causes. It may be an illness, maybe grieving the loss of a loved one. It may be financial constrictions, professional challenges, family impediments, social pressures. Forgive our limitations, and may we be of greater help, so our brothers and sisters in humanity, including the animals and plants, feel our consideration towards them, unconditionally being available to giving them a hand and bringing your consoling proposal. We thank you for the loving spirits that guide these moments of loving gathering, instructing us, and especially for Neio Lucio, for his efforts in reporting to us immortal moments of the Master. And so be it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Tomorrow, it's the story, The Inconstant Worker, Chapter 5. Mystery around it. Who is the inconstant worker? Since we've learned about being a worker, having the inner drive, complying with it, practicing it. Is it possible that we are the inconstant worker? I don't know. Let's come back tomorrow for more stories by the Master here at Kardec Radio, always nourishing our souls. Big hug to you, friends. And until tomorrow, God willing.